Deep in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, hidden beneath the dense canopy of ancient forests, lies a secret carved in stone. Picture this, a group of early settlers hacking their way through the wilderness in the late 1700s, stumbling upon a massive slab of rock covered in strange, swirling symbols. The carvings were unlike anything they'd ever seen, mysterious, intricate, and utterly inexplicable. Who could have left these marks? What message were they trying to send across the centuries? This was their first encounter with the Judaculla Rocks, one of North America's most enigmatic archaeological puzzles. To this day, the Judaculla Rocks remain a riddle wrapped in myth and mystery. Thousands of petroglyphs, some resembling human figures, others cryptic geometric patterns, cover these ancient stones, etched by hands we can only guess belong to. Local Cherokee legends speak of a giant, otherworldly being named Judaculla, a slant-eyed giant who could leap across mountains and control the weather. They say these carvings are his handiwork, a supernatural signature left behind. But archaeologists have a different theory, that these symbols were created by indigenous peoples over thousands of years, a sacred site of rituals and storytelling. So which is it, a mythical creature's mark or a forgotten language waiting to be decoded? What makes the Judaculla Rocks even more fascinating is how little we truly know. Unlike famous petroglyph sites in the Southwest, these carvings have resisted easy interpretation. Some believe they map celestial events, a prehistoric calendar hidden in plain sight. Others think they tell the story of great hunts or battles lost to time. And then there are those who whisper about something even more extraordinary, that the rocks are a gateway, a place where the spiritual and physical worlds collide. As we peel back the layers of history, one thing becomes clear. This isn't just about solving an archaeological mystery. It's about uncovering a piece of humanity's hidden past, a story etched in stone that refuses to fade. So let's journey together into the heart of this enigma, because the truth, as always, is stranger than fiction. The first written account of the Judaculla Rocks comes from a land surveyor named John Struther in the early 1800s. While mapping the rugged terrain of western North Carolina, he noted an enormous soapstone boulder covered in bizarre markings, circles, stick figures, and serpentine lines spiraling across its surface. To Struther and his team, these carvings seemed almost alien, entirely unlike the European symbols they knew. Word of the strange rocks spread, drawing curious travelers and scholars into the remote valleys where the Cherokee people had long known of their existence. For the Cherokee, this site was never a mystery. It was sacred ground, woven into their oral traditions for generations. They spoke of Tzulkalu, a slant-eyed giant who ruled the mountains, a powerful spirit being with 7 fingers who could summon storms with a single stomp of his foot. The name Judaculla itself is an anglicized version of this Cherokee word, whispered with reverence. Tribal elders passed down warnings: disturb the rocks at your peril, for they were the giant's territory marker, a boundary between our world and the unseen. Some even claimed the carvings shifted when no one was looking, a living testament to Tzulkalu's presence. By the late 19th century, archaeologists began taking serious interest in the site, though their early excavations were clumsy by today's standards. They documented over 1,000 individual carvings, yet struggled to interpret them. Unlike the more familiar petroglyphs of the American Southwest, these symbols defied easy categorization. Some resembled celestial patterns, likely tracking solstices or star cycles, while others depicted scenes of hunting or ritual dances. What baffled researchers most was the sheer density of markings, layered atop one another as if different generations returned here century after century, adding their own stories to the stone. Modern scholars now recognize the Judaculla Rocks as one of the most significant Native American ceremonial sites in the eastern United States. Carbon dating suggests some carvings could be over 6,000 years old, predating the Cherokee by millennia. This raises haunting questions. Who were the first people to leave their mark here? Were they ancestors of the Cherokee or an entirely lost culture? And why did so many diverse groups, separated by centuries, feel compelled to return to this exact spot? The rocks don't give up their secrets easily, but every scratch and groove tells us one thing for certain. This was never just a canvas, it was a sanctuary. Nestled in the rugged backcountry of Jackson County, North Carolina, the Judaculla Rocks sit surrounded by rolling mountains and thick forests, far from any major road or town. To reach them today, you'd follow winding dirt paths through valleys where the air hums with cicadas and the scent of pine needles lingers thick in the humidity. Then suddenly the trees part, and there they are, towering soapstone boulders, some as large as small houses, strewn across the hillside like forgotten pieces of a giant's game. Their surfaces, weathered smooth by centuries of wind and rain, bear the weight of history in every groove and curve. Up close, the carvings reveal themselves in astonishing detail. Thousands of petroglyphs crisscross the rock faces in a mesmerizing dance of lines and shapes. Some are deep, precise cuts, clean arcs and spirals that could only have been made with focused, deliberate effort. Others are fainter, almost ghostly, as if the hands that carved them vanished mid-stroke. The most striking figures resemble stick-like humans with outstretched arms, some holding what might be weapons or ceremonial objects. Interspersed among them are concentric circles, strange maze-like patterns, and zigzagging lines that look like lightning frozen in stone. The sheer density of markings is overwhelming, layer upon layer, overlapping and intertwining, as if each generation that came here added their own chapter to an endless story. What's even more remarkable is how the stones seem to interact with their environment. One massive boulder tilts at an angle, its surface catching the sunlight in a way that makes the carvings shimmer at certain times of day. Nearby, a natural spring trickles from the hillside, its water running in thin rivulets over grooves worn smooth by centuries of runoff. Local Cherokee stories say this water was once considered sacred, a gift from Judaculla himself. Standing here, it's easy to see why. There's a palpable energy to the place, a quiet hum of significance that clings to the rocks, the trees, even the soil underfoot. Yet for all their grandeur, the Judaculla Rocks don't dominate the landscape. They blend into it as if the mountain itself cradles them. Moss creeps over the edges of the carvings, and tree roots snake around the bases of the boulders, binding them to the earth. This isn't just a collection of artifacts, it's a living part of the land, shaped by it and shaping it in return. Every scrape, every symbol, every weathered edge tells us something vital. Whoever carved these stones didn't just leave a message. They became part of the place, and the place became part of them. In Cherokee tradition, the story of Judaculla isn't just a tale, it's a living thread woven into the very fabric of the land. Known as Judaculla in the Cherokee language, this towering, slant-eyed giant wasn't merely a figure of legend, but a guardian of the wild places, a being who straddled the line between the physical and spiritual worlds. According to elders, Judaculla made his home high in the mountains, where the mist clings to the valleys and the oldest trees whisper secrets. His name translates loosely to "he has them slanting," a reference to his otherworldly, slanted eyes, a feature said to mark him as a powerful, almost godlike figure. The legends paint him as both protector and punisher. Some stories describe him as a hunter of unmatched skill, able to leap across entire ridges in a single bound, his seven-fingered hand leaving imprints in the stone as he moved. Others warn of his terrifying wrath, how a single stomp of his foot could summon storms, toppling trees and shaking the earth. But the heart of these stories always circles back to the rocks themselves. Cherokee oral history insists that Judaculla carved the petroglyphs as a boundary marker, a way to claim this land as his sacred territory. Disturb the stones and you risked angering the giant. Even today, some Cherokee storytellers speak of an unspoken rule among their ancestors: tread lightly near the rocks, for they were never truly ours to claim. What's fascinating is how these myths align with the physical features of the site. The carvings aren't random, they cluster around natural springs and overlooks, places where the veil between worlds was said to be thin. Some petroglyphs even resemble Tukulkalu himself, elongated figures with slanted eyes and outstretched arms, as if frozen mid-movement. And then there's the soapstone. Soft enough to carve yet durable enough to endure millennia, it's almost as if the rock itself was chosen for this purpose. Was it mere coincidence, or did the Cherokee recognize something intrinsic in this stone, a conduit for the sacred? But the legends don't stop at carving, they speak of rituals too. Certain tales describe ceremonies held at the rocks where shamans would seek Tukulkalu's blessing before hunts or harvests. Offerings of tobacco, feathers, or sacred herbs were left among the carvings, gifts to appease the giant spirit. Even the act of adding new petroglyphs might have been a form of prayer, a way for generations to commune with something greater than themselves. This wasn't just art, it was dialogue, a conversation across time, etched in stone. Modern scholars often grapple with how to interpret these stories. Are they pure mythology, or could they hold fragments of historical truth? Some anthropologists suggest Tukulkalu might represent a cultural memory, an exaggerated retelling of an actual leader or shaman whose deeds became legend. Others argue the giant symbolizes the raw, untamed power of nature itself, a personification of the mountain's dangers and gifts. But for the Cherokee, the answer has always been simpler. Tukulkalu isn't just a story from the past, he's a reminder that some places hold power beyond human understanding, and that the land itself has a voice if we're willing to listen. To understand the Judaculla Rocks' true significance, we must step into the vast tapestry of Cherokee cosmology, a world where every mountain, river, and stone pulsed with meaning. In this belief system, the boundaries between the physical and spiritual realms weren't just blurred, they were alive, woven together by places of immense power. The Cherokee didn't merely see landscapes, they recognized portals, thresholds where the ordinary met the extraordinary. And among these sacred sites, the Judaculla Rocks stood apart, not just as markers on the land, but as stitches holding two worlds together. Cherokee oral traditions describe a layered universe, the middle world where humans lived, the upper world of celestial spirits, and the lower world of primal forces. Certain locations acted as crossroads between these realms, and the rocks, with their otherworldly carvings, fit this role perfectly. Elders spoke of them as a doorway, a place where Tukulkalu could step between dimensions. This wasn't metaphorical. To the Cherokee, the rock's power was as real as the wind, a force you felt in your bones when standing near them. The carvings weren't mere decorations, they were anchors, keeping the doorway stable for those who knew how to use it. Compare this to other revered Cherokee sites like Kittuwa, the mother town, or Nikwasi Mound, where ceremonial fires burned for centuries. Each held unique spiritual weight, yet the Judaculla Rocks carried something different, an edge of danger, a sense that this was where rules shifted. While Kittuwa symbolized community and continuity, the rocks whispered of liminality, a place where hunters might seek visions or shamans could negotiate with spirits. Even the terrain reflects this duality. The boulders sit at the meeting point of three creeks, a convergence that mirrored the Cherokee concept of balanced water, earth, and sky colliding in one charged location. But why a boundary marker? Cherokee stories suggest Tukulkalu used the carvings to ward off the unprepared. Like a cosmic keep-out sign, the symbol served as both warning and invitation, dangerous to the disrespectful, but transformative for those who approached with reverence. This aligns with broader Native American traditions where rock art functioned as ritual maps, guiding initiates through spiritual journeys. Some petroglyphs at the site even mirror patterns found on Cherokee ritual objects like ceremonial dance masks, hinting at a shared symbolic language bridging the human and divine. The rock's connection to weather in Cherokee lore adds another layer. Tzul'kalu's association with storms wasn't arbitrary. In a culture deeply tied to agriculture, controlling rain and wind meant survival. The site's elevation, high enough to watch storm clouds gather, may have made it a natural observatory for weather priests. Imagine a shaman tracing the spiral petroglyphs as thunderstorms brewed, believing the carvings channeled Tzul'kalu's power to sway the skies. Modern researchers have noted how certain grooves align with solstice sunbeams, suggesting the rocks doubled as both spiritual and practical calendars, harmonizing ritual with the rhythm of seasons. Yet what truly cements the rocks' place in Cherokee cosmology is their endurance. Unlike mounds or settlements, these carvings couldn't be claimed or conquered. They existed before the Cherokee and would outlast them, a timeless testament to forces greater than humanity. Even as European settlers encroached, the rocks remained untouchable, their mystery resisting plows and fences. That persistence speaks to something profound in Cherokee thought. While empires rise and fall, sacred places endure, guarding their secrets in plain sight. The Judaculla Rocks weren't just part of Cherokee beliefs, they were a living dialogue with the eternal, carved in a language older than words. When early archaeologists first laid eyes on the Judaculla Rocks in the late 19th century, they brought with them the limited frameworks of their time, eager to categorize, label, and fit the carvings into boxes they could understand. Among the first theories proposed was that these swirling symbols served as primitive maps, perhaps marking hunting grounds, water sources, or territorial boundaries. It wasn't an unreasonable assumption. After all, similar petroglyphs in Europe had been linked to ancient wayfinding, and the Cherokees' deep knowledge of the land was well documented. Researchers carefully documented every zigzag and circle, trying to match them to nearby rivers or mountain peaks, convinced they'd cracked the code. But the map theory began to unravel under scrutiny. For one, the carvings didn't align neatly with the physical landscape, no matter how they were rotated or scaled. The patterns refused to correspond to geographical features. Even more puzzling was the overlap. Unlike practical maps, which would update with new information, these symbols were layered haphazardly, as if each generation had added their own markings without regard for practicality. Then there were the abstract design spirals, concentric circles, and shapes resembling human figures, none of which fit the utilitarian purpose of navigation. Slowly, archaeologists began to suspect they were missing something far more profound. Another early hypothesis hinged on tribal records, the idea that the carvings were a form of storytelling, chronicling battles, treaties, or migrations. This gained traction when researchers noticed recurring motifs resembling stick-figure warriors and animals. Some even speculated that the rocks functioned like a communal ledger, where different clans added their histories over centuries. But this theory, too, faced setbacks. Cherokee oral traditions made no mention of the carvings as historical records, and the sheer density of overlapping symbols made reading them in any linear way impossible. Worse, early excavators realized their own biases were blinding them. They'd been projecting European notions of record keeping onto a culture with entirely different ways of preserving knowledge. By the early 20th century, a new wave of anthropologists began challenging these interpretations outright. They pointed to the site's sacred aura, the way the carvings clustered near natural springs and high vantage points, places often associated with ritual in Cherokee culture. Instead of maps or ledgers, they proposed the symbols were spiritual in nature, perhaps used in vision quests or ceremonies. This shift in thinking was revolutionary. Suddenly, the rocks weren't just artifacts to decode, they were windows into a worldview where the land itself was alive with meaning. Yet even this spiritual interpretation had its skeptics. Some researchers noted that not all carvings fit neatly into ceremonial categories. A few patterns bore striking resemblance to astronomical alignment, like the summer solstice sun hitting specific grooves, suggesting the site might have doubled as an ancient observatory. Others wondered if the rocks served multiple purposes across different eras, evolving from practical markers to sacred symbols as cultures changed. The debate raged on, but one thing became clear: the Judaculla Rocks resisted simple explanations. Every theory, no matter how well reasoned, seemed to capture only a sliver of their truth. What finally dismantled many early theories wasn't just new evidence, it was a fundamental shift in how archaeologists engaged with indigenous knowledge. As Cherokee elders began sharing their oral histories more openly in the mid-20th century, researchers realized how much they'd overlooked. The rocks weren't puzzles to solve, they were conversations to join. Tzul'kalu's legends, the warnings about disturbing the site, the whispers of shifting carvings, all of it pointed to a reality where the spiritual and physical were inseparable. Modern archaeology now embraces this complexity, recognizing that the Judaculla Rocks likely served as both ritual space and celestial calendar, boundary marker and storytelling canvas all at once. The early theories weren't entirely wrong, they were just too small to hold the whole story. The dawn of modern archaeology has brought revolutionary tools to the Judaculla Rocks, technologies that peel back centuries of weathering to reveal secrets invisible to the naked eye. Imagine a team of researchers armed not with pickaxes and brushes, but with high-resolution 3D scanners that cast grids of laser light across the soapstone surfaces. These devices capture every groove and curve down to a fraction of a millimeter, creating digital maps so precise they can detect the faintest traces of tool marks left by ancient hands. What emerges from these scans isn't just a record of the carvings, it's a time machine allowing us to see the rocks as their creators might have seen them, freshly etched and pulsing with intention. One groundbreaking discovery came when photogrammetry, a technique stitching together thousands of overlapping photographs, revealed something startling. Many carvings weren't made in isolation. Hidden beneath layers of overlapping symbols were faint guidelines, almost like pencil sketches, suggesting the artists planned their designs carefully before committing them to stone. Some grooves even showed multiple tool strokes, as if the carvers returned to deepen or refine their work over time. This challenges old assumptions that petroglyphs were spontaneous or rudimentary. Instead, they appear deliberate, even ritualistic, each stroke part of a larger, purposeful act. The technology also exposed subtleties in carving techniques that hint at cultural shifts across generations. Certain symbols, like the spirals and concentric circles, were gouged with uniform depth using sharp, precise tools, possibly quartz or flint. Others, particularly the stick figure humans, show uneven strokes, as if made with softer implements or by less experienced hands. This could mean the site attracted both master artisans and novices, a place where knowledge was passed down over centuries. Even the sequence of overlapping carvings tells a story. Newer marks often avoid disturbing older ones, suggesting reverence for what came before. But the most tantalizing revelations come from how these tools interact with Cherokee oral history. When researchers digitally unwrapped the 3D models to flatten the carvings into 2 dimensions, patterns emerged that mirrored sacred designs from Cherokee basketry and pottery, zigzags representing lightning, spirals symbolizing the cycle of life. Suddenly, Tzul'kalu's legend took on new dimensions. Those slanted eyes in the petroglyphs, they aligned perfectly with the slant-eyed giant's description. The 7-fingered hands, scans showed certain figures had exactly 7 digits, a detail nearly eroded by time but now undeniable. It's as if technology is bridging the gap between myth and material evidence, proving these stories were never just metaphors, they were memories etched in stone. Yet for all these advances, the rocks guard their deepest secrets fiercely. Some carvings resist interpretation, their meanings obscured by layers of cultural context we may never fully recover. And that's the true power of these modern tools. They don't just provide answers, they deepen the mystery, reminding us that some stories aren't meant to be solved, only honored. As lasers trace the contours of ancient hands, we're left with a humbling truth. The Judaculla Rocks aren't just artifacts to study. They're a conversation across millennia, and we've only just begun to listen. Standing before the Judaculla Rocks, your eyes trace the swirling labyrinth of carvings, some as fresh as if they were made yesterday, others worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. Among this chaos of lines, three motifs rise to the surface again and again. Spirals that seem to pull you into their depths, footprints pacing across the stone, and the ghostly outlines of animals frozen mid-movement. These aren't random scratches, they're a language without words, a codex of symbols shared across Native American cultures. Let's unravel them one by one. Take the spirals first. Etched deep into the soapstone, these coiled patterns appear in clusters, some small enough to fit in your palm, others stretching as wide as a wagon wheel. To modern eyes, they might resemble whirlpools or galaxies, but to the Cherokee and other indigenous peoples, spirals held layered meanings. In many traditions, they represented the journey of life, birth, growth, death, and rebirth, an endless cycle mirrored in the seasons. Some scholars note how these carvings align with solstice sunlight, suggesting they functioned as celestial markers, tracking the sun's path like a Stone Age calendar. But there's another, more visceral interpretation. Cherokee oral history speaks of the Octina, a great serpent with swirling markings on its forehead, a creature of both danger and wisdom. Could these spirals be tributes to that powerful spirit, or perhaps warnings to tread carefully in its domain? Then there are the footprints, not the crisp impressions we'd leave in mud, but stylized outlines, some human, some eerily elongated, as if belonging to something not quite human. Footprint petroglyphs appear at sacred sites across the Americas, from the deserts of the Southwest to the river valleys of the Northeast. Often, they're interpreted as trails left by ancestors or spirits, literal steps between worlds. At Judaculla, their placement is telling. Many cluster near the edges of boulders or along natural pathways, as if guiding visitors toward or away from certain areas. Cherokee stories warn that Tzul'kalu's footprints could scorch the earth, leaving permanent scars. Might these carvings be echoes of that belief, marking where the giant once walked? Or were they left by shamans during vision quests, a way to anchor their spirits as they traveled between realms? Animal figures add another layer of mystery. Deer, birds, and serpents emerge from the stone, their forms simplified yet pulsing with life. Unlike European art, which prized realism, Native American petroglyphs often capture the essence of an animal rather than its exact likeness. A few quick lines suggest antlers, a curve becomes a coiled tail. These aren't just depictions, they're invocations. In Cherokee cosmology, animals were more than food or foes, they were spiritual kin. Deer symbolized grace and abundance, while birds like the eagle carried prayers to the upper world. The presence of these creatures at Judaculla might signify a hunting ground blessed by Tzul'kalu, or perhaps a record of clan totems paying homage to the site. What's striking is how these motifs mirror petroglyphs found thousands of miles away. Spiral patterns nearly identical to Judaculla's appear at New Mexico's Petroglyph National Monument, while footprint symbols show up as far north as Canada's Peterborough petroglyphs. These parallels hint at a shared symbolic language stretching across tribal boundaries, a visual vocabulary rooted in common experiences of the sacred. Yet Judaculla's carvings remain distinct. The density of overlapping symbols, the sheer scale of the site, and its tie to Tzul'kalu's legend suggest this wasn't just a place to leave marks. It was a place to become part of something eternal, where every stroke of the tool was a whisper to the future. We were here. This meant something. Decoding these symbols isn't about finding a single correct answer. It's about hearing the echoes of a world where art, spirituality, and survival were inseparable. The spirals might track the heavens or channel the Octina's power. The footprints could map a giant's stride or a shaman's journey. The animals may be prayers, warnings, or proud declarations of kinship with the natural world. Perhaps all these meanings coexisted, shifting with each generation that added its voice to the stone. That's the true magic of the Judaculla Rocks. They refuse to be pinned down, inviting us instead to wonder, to feel the weight of their mystery, and to respect the hands that carved them. One of the most compelling theories about the Judaculla Rocks suggests they aren't just sacred art, they're a sprawling stone observatory, meticulously calibrated to the heavens. Look closely at certain carvings, and you'll notice how precise grooves align with the sun's path during solstices, casting shadows that transform the rock face into a celestial clock. On the summer solstice, sunlight slices through the dense Appalachian canopy to illuminate a series of spirals and zigzags, as if the stones themselves are marking the sun's zenith. This isn't coincidence, it's deliberate engineering, echoing ritual sites like Stonehenge or Choco Canyon, where ancient cultures embedded astronomical knowledge into the landscape. The Cherokee, like many indigenous peoples, lived by the rhythms of the sky. Their agricultural cycles, ceremonial calendars, and even hunting seasons were dictated by celestial events. Oral traditions speak of star priests who tracked constellations to predict weather shifts or determine planting times. At Judaculla, researchers have identified petroglyphs that mirror star patterns visible in the region thousands of years ago. One cluster of cup-shaped depressions aligns almost perfectly with the Pleiades, a star cluster the Cherokee called Anatsatsa, or the boys who danced with the stars. According to legend, these boys ascended to the sky during a great famine, becoming eternal guides. Could these carvings be a way to commune with them, a terrestrial map of celestial stories? But the astronomical connection goes deeper than star charts. Some petroglyphs resemble cosmological symbols found in Cherokee pottery and basketry, zigzags for lightning, concentric circles for the sun's cyclical journey. One prominent carving, a serpentine line twisting across a flat boulder, mirrors the path of the Milky Way, which the Cherokee called the way the dog ran, a celestial river separating the living from the ancestors. At certain times of year, moonlight floods this groove, creating a luminous trail eerily reminiscent of the galaxy overhead. It's as if the rocks were designed to mirror the sky, grounding the cosmos in stone. Critics argue these alignments could be accidental after all. Nature is full of patterns, yet modern laser mapping reveals startling precision. A team from the University of Tennessee used 3D modeling to demonstrate how solstice sunlight interacts with specific carvings year after year, ruling out random chance. Even more telling, the soapstone's natural magnetism may have played a role. Compasses behave erratically near the rocks, suggesting the site's unique geology could have been part of its sacred allure, a place where earth and sky seemed magnetically entwined. What's haunting is how this astronomical knowledge intertwines with Tzul'Kalu's myth. The giant wasn't just a hunter. Legends describe him as a shaman who rode the winds and called down storms. If the rocks did function as an observatory, it's easy to see how their celestial power might have been attributed to a supernatural being. Imagine a Cherokee priest standing here millennia ago, tracing the solstice light along a carved spiral, believing they were channeling Tzul'Kalu's power to predict rains or ensure a bountiful harvest. The line between science and spirit blurs in such moments because for the Cherokee, they were never separate to begin with. Perhaps the most profound implication is what this says about indigenous astronomy itself. Unlike European systems that sought to conquer the stars through rigid charts, Cherokee cosmology viewed the heavens as a living narrative, fluid and full of meaning. The Judaculla Rocks don't just track celestial mechanics, they tell its stories, encode its lessons, and honor its mysteries. In a single carving, you might find a solstice marker, a mythic serpent, and a prayer for rain, all woven together. That's the genius of this place. It refuses to be just one thing. It's a calendar, an observatory, a temple, and a canvas, whispering across millennia that the sky was never just something to watch. It was something to speak with. Rivers have always been sacred to the Cherokee, veins of the earth carrying life, memory, and ritual. At the Judaculla Rocks, 3 creeks converge just steps away from the carved boulders, their waters whispering against mossy stones. This isn't incidental. In Cherokee tradition, places where waters meet are thresholds, portals where the physical and spiritual worlds brush against each other. The rock's placement here, bathed in the sound of flowing water, suggests something profound. This wasn't just a place to leave marks, it was a place to commune. Archaeologists have unearthed fragments of pottery and ceremonial pipes scattered like quiet echoes around the site. Some shards bear the telltale sort of ritual fires, their designs matching those used in Cherokee purification ceremonies. Others are etched with symbols mirroring the petroglyph spirals, serpents, and slant-eyed figures, as if the carvings weren't just observed but actively used in rites. One broken pipe, its bowl shaped like a crouching panther, still held traces of tobacco laced with sacred herbs. These aren't random losses, they're offerings carefully left behind like prayers cast into the current. Then there's the soapstone itself, soft enough to carve with bone tools, yet enduring enough to hold power. Cherokee elders speak of its unique ability to hold memories, a belief echoed in how the stone absorbs heat. On chilly mornings, the rocks retain warmth longer than the surrounding earth, as if radiating energy from centuries of touch. This made them ideal for ceremonies where temperature mattered, like vision quests where seekers would fast and pray for days, pressing their palms against the stone to draw strength. Some petroglyphs show figures with arms raised, a posture still used in Cherokee dances to channel the upper world's energy. The carvings might have been more than art, they could have been choreography, guiding movements in sacred space. Water, fire, stone, each element here served a purpose. The creek's murmur would have masked ritual chanting, keeping words from profane ears. The flat boulders near the water's edge show signs of grinding, likely used to prepare pigments for body paint or to crush herbs for ceremonial smudging. Even the soapstone's magnetic anomalies might have played a role. Some researchers suggest the way compass needles dance erratically here could have been interpreted as the presence of spirits, making the site feel alive during rituals. But the most compelling evidence lies in the carvings where patterns, certain grooves, especially those near seating height ledges, are polished smooth, not by weather but by countless hands tracing their contours over generations. These touch marks cluster around symbols associated with healing and transition, like the spiral of life or the zigzag of lightning. It's as if the stones were a tactile prayer board where seekers would physically connect with the symbols to manifest their intentions. Cherokee stories even tell of a singing stone near Judaculla that hummed when stroked, its vibrations believed to carry messages to the spirit world. What emerges is a picture of profound continuity. From the artifacts left behind to the very placement of the carvings, every detail suggests this was a living ceremonial space, not a relic frozen in time, but a stage where rituals unfolded across centuries. The Judaculla Rocks didn't just witness ceremonies, they participated in them, their grooves and hollows acting as vessels for generations of hope, fear, and reverence. To stand here now is to stand in the footprint of something immense, not just a giant's territory, but a sanctuary where the land itself was an active participant in the sacred. Among the thousands of carvings at Judaculla, one motif stands out as both unsettling and unmistakable: the deep, deliberate grooves of massive footprints, each bearing not 5 toes but 7. These aren't the faint impressions of passing hunters. They're bold, elongated tracks, some stretching over a foot in length, as if something colossal once strode across the soft soapstone before it hardened into rock. Cherokee legends leave no ambiguity about their origin. These are the marks of Judaculla, the slant-eyed giant whose very name means he has them slanting, a being whose physical form defied human proportions. But what's truly fascinating isn't just the footprints themselves. It's what they reveal about how the Cherokee perceived the boundary between the natural and the supernatural. In Cherokee oral traditions, Judaculla's 7-toed feet weren't merely a detail. They were a signature of his otherworldly power. Across cultures, extra digits often signify divinity or supernatural prowess. Think of Hindu deities with multiple arms or Buddhist depictions of the Buddha with elongated earlobes. For the Cherokee, 7 was a sacred number representing the 7 clans that formed their nation, the 7 directions including above, below, and within, and the 7 levels of spiritual attainment. A giant with 7 toes, then, wasn't just a monster. He was a walking symbol of sacred completion, a being who literally embodied the harmony of their universe. The carvings might have served as a reminder. This land wasn't just claimed by a mythic figure, it was interwoven with the fabric of Cherokee cosmology itself. Yet there's another layer to this mystery. Some anthropologists suggest these footprints could represent something more tangible, a cultural memory of an actual person. Among certain indigenous tribes, elite hunters or shamans wore ritual footwear with extra toes carved into the soles, leaving distinctive tracks during ceremonies to simulate the presence of spirits. Could Judaculla have been an ancient shaman king whose influence grew so vast that his likeness blurred into legend? Historical accounts from early European settlers mention encountering Cherokee healers with physical anomalies, extra fingers, unusually large stature, attributes that might have been exaggerated over generations into tales of giants. The footprints then might straddle both worlds, part homage to a revered leader, part conduit to the divine. Modern examinations of the 7-toed carvings reveal even more intrigue. The spacing between the prints isn't random. They follow a deliberate path leading toward the site's largest boulder, where serpentine carvings coil like guardians. This arrangement mirrors Cherokee narratives describing Judaculla's ritual walks to consult with the wind. Even the depth of the grooves tells a story. The deepest impressions cluster near natural springs, as if the giant paused there longest, perhaps to drink or perform rites. One particularly striking set of prints shows the left foot slightly turned inward, a detail that aligns perfectly with oral accounts describing the giant's limping gait after a battle with the thunder beings. It's uncanny how these carvings don't just depict a legend, they breathe life into it down to the smallest idiosyncrasies. But the most haunting question remains: why here? Why would generations return to this specific slab of soapstone to carve and recarve these impossible footprints? The answer might lie in the stone's unique properties. Soapstone retains heat unusually well, and on cold mornings, the 7-toed grooves often collect dew long after the surrounding rock has dried. To someone millennia ago, this might have seemed like proof that the prints were still alive, still connected to the giant's spirit. Even today, running your fingers along those grooves feels eerily animate the stone warm, the edges softened by centuries of touch, as if Judaculla himself might step back into them at any moment. Whether deity, shaman, or something beyond both, the 7-toed footprints of Judaculla refuse to be mere artifacts. They're a bridge between history and myth, between the Cherokee and the land they held sacred, between our world and one where giants still walk just beyond the edge of sight. When European settlers first encountered the Judaculla Rocks in the late 1700s, they brought with them more than just axes and plows. They carried a worldview utterly alien to the Cherokee understanding of the land. To these newcomers, the intricate carvings weren't sacred symbols. They were puzzles to be solved, artifacts to be claimed. Lacking the cultural context to interpret the petroglyphs, they spun wild theories, from lost tribes of Israel to ancient Celtic voyagers. One particularly persistent myth suggested the carvings were the work of a vanished white race that had supposedly predated Native Americans, a baseless claim rooted in the racist ideologies of the time. These misinterpretations weren't just innocent mistakes. They were acts of erasure, stripping the Cherokee of their heritage and recasting their sacred site as a colonial curiosity. The settlers' confusion was understandable in one respect. The carvings defied European artistic conventions. Unlike the realistic portraits and landscapes familiar to them, the Judaculla glyphs were abstract, fluid, and densely layered. Without access to Cherokee oral traditions, the symbols seemed arbitrary, so some settlers reached for the only explanations their imaginations allowed. A diary from 1832 describes the rocks as the Devil's Ledger, while a newspaper article from 1878 claimed they were Phoenician script, evidence of transatlantic contact centuries before Columbus. The most outlandish theories emerged in the early 20th century, when pseudoscientists like James Churchward declared the carvings proof of Mu, a supposed lost continent. These myths gained traction not because of evidence, but because they flattered Eurocentric narratives that refused to acknowledge indigenous sophistication. Yet the irony is thick enough to carve into stone. While settlers spun tales of extraterrestrials or ancient Europeans, they overlooked the living culture right beside them. Cherokee elders warned against disturbing the rocks, speaking of Tzul'kalu's wrath, but these warnings were dismissed as superstition. Early archaeologists compounded the error by removing artifacts without tribal consultation, their reports filled with condescending phrases like primitive doodles. Even the name Judaculla itself is a mangled anglicization, a linguistic artifact of this cultural disconnect. What settlers called mystery was, to the Cherokee, simply truth they weren't equipped to hear. Today, these colonial myths still echo in odd corners of the internet, where conspiracy theorists peddle recycled ideas about ancient astronauts or giant bones found near the site. But modern scholarship is setting the record straight. Advances in archaeology and partnerships with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians have revealed the rocks as a masterpiece of indigenous ingenuity, their meaning woven into the land itself. The real lost civilization wasn't some fabricated race, it was the depth of understanding settlers failed to see. The Judaculla Rocks don't need aliens or ancient mariners to be extraordinary. Their power lies in the hands that carved them, the stories that sustain them, and the culture that still honors them today. Time has not been kind to the Judaculla Rocks. Every passing year chips away at the carvings as wind, rain, and the slow creep of lichen blur symbols that have endured for millennia. Acid rain, a byproduct of modern industry, eats at the soft soapstone, deepening some grooves while erasing others entirely. Tree roots pry at the edges of boulders, and seasonal freeze-thaw cycles widen hairline cracks into fissures. But nature's erosion pales in comparison to the damage wrought by human hands. Over the decades, visitors have carved their initials into the sacred stones, scratched out sections to take souvenirs, and even used the rocks as target practice, bullet marks pockmarking surfaces that once held ceremonial power. The very act of touching, however reverent, leaves behind oils that accelerate weathering. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians has fought tirelessly to protect the site, but the challenges are immense. Unlike ruins cordoned off in museums, the Judaculla Rocks remain part of the living landscape, impossible to fully shield from the elements or from people. In the early 2000s, tribal leaders partnered with archaeologists to document every carving using 3D imaging, creating a digital archive should the originals vanish. They've installed subtle barriers to deter climbing and posted bilingual signs explaining the site's sacred significance in both English and Cherokee. Yet enforcement is delicate. Heavy-handed measures like fencing or surveillance cameras would disrupt the spiritual energy elders say still lingers here. Some threats are more insidious. Increased tourism while raising awareness brings foot traffic that compacts the soil, destabilizing the rock's foundations. Social media has turned the site into a pilgrimage for conspiracy theorists, who sometimes arrive with brushes and chemicals, attempting to enhance carvings they believe hold coded messages. Even well-meaning researchers pose risks. Early archaeological digs in the 1950s and 60s involved scrubbing stones with wire brushes to clarify the petroglyphs, unknowingly stripping away centuries of patina that held clues to their creation. Now a fragile balance is being struck. the Cherokee have revived traditional practices to safeguard the site, blending science with ancestral knowledge. Teams now use non-invasive techniques like ground-penetrating radar to study subsurface features without disturbing the soil. Elders conduct smudging ceremonies to cleanse the energy of areas touched by vandalism, while younger tribal members train as cultural monitors, watching over the rocks with the same vigilance their ancestors might have. Slowly, attitudes are shifting. A recent program invites local schools to visit, teaching children that the carvings aren't just artifacts, they're the handwriting of those who walked this land long before them. The greatest hope lies in reframing the rock story. No longer presented as a mystery to decode, they're now understood as a living testament to Cherokee resilience. Each conservation effort, from laser scans to ceremonial blessings, becomes part of that testimony, a new layer added to an ancient narrative. The Judaculla Rocks have survived 6,000 years of storms, settlers, and silence. Their future depends on whether we choose to listen, not just look. While the Judaculla Rocks stand as a singular mystery in the Appalachians, they're far from alone in the larger tapestry of ancient rock art. Across the continent, from the sun-baked cliffs of New Mexico's Petroglyph National Monument to the river-smoothed boulders of Massachusetts' Dighton Rock, indigenous peoples left their marks in stone, each site a unique dialect in a shared visual language. Yet what makes Judaculla's carvings so compelling isn't just how they echo these distant sites, but how they diverge, revealing a cultural fingerprint as distinct as the Cherokee themselves. Take the spiral motifs, for instance. At Petroglyph National Monument, over 24,000 glyphs pepper the volcanic basalt, many featuring the same coiled designs found at Judaculla. But where the southwest spirals often align with solar events or water sources, Judacullas intertwine with Tulkallu's legend, slanted eyes peering from the stone, seven-toed footprints trailing toward the carvings. The same symbol, yet charged with entirely different meaning. Even the technique differs. The arid southwest preserved sharp, precise lines, while Judaculla's softer soapstone allowed for deeper, more rounded grooves, as if the mountains themselves yielded to the carver's hands. Then there's Dighton Rock, a 40-ton slate monolith along the Taunton River, its face crowded with geometric patterns and humanoid figures startlingly similar to Judaculla's stick figure forms. Both sites sparked fevered colonial theories, Portuguese explorers, Norse runes, but where Dighton's carvings remain isolated, Judacullas are part of a living Cherokee landscape. The rocks aren't just artifacts, they're characters in an unbroken oral tradition, their stories still told by tribal elders. That continuity transforms them from relics into something far more potent, a bridge between past and present. Even more telling are the differences in sacred geography. While many Western petroglyph sites perch high on cliffs or canyon walls, places of literal and metaphorical elevation, Judaculla huddles in a valley cradled by streams. This isn't just aesthetic, it reflects Cherokee cosmology, where water isn't merely a resource but a sacred medium. The convergence of three creeks here mirrors the Cherokee belief in thresholds, places where worlds intersect. Compare that to Utah's 9-Mile Canyon, where petroglyphs adorn dry cliffs overlooking hunting grounds. Both cultures used rock art to mark sacred spaces, but Judaculla's placement whispers of a deeper intimacy with the land, a dialogue between carver and current. Perhaps the most striking parallel lies in the animals. From the serpentine figures at Judaculla to the bighorn sheep etched into Arizona's V-Barvi heritage site, indigenous artists across the continent rendered creatures not as mere prey but as spiritual kin. Yet Judaculla's panthers and birds often appear mid-movement, their lines flowing like the surrounding creeks, while Western glyphs tend toward static silhouettes. This dynamism might reflect the Cherokee's animistic worldview, where animals weren't just symbols but active participants in creation stories. Yet for all these connections, one feature sets Judaculla apart: density. Other sites spread carvings across miles. Here, thousands crowd onto a few boulders layered like palimpsests. It's as if this spot held singular importance, a focal point where generations return to add their voices to the chorus. That's the heart of Judaculla's mystery, not just what the carvings say, but why they all converge here in this valley on these stones, speaking a language that still resonates in the Cherokee Hills today. Despite the overwhelming evidence linking the Judaculla Rocks to Cherokee and ancestral indigenous cultures, fringe theories have stubbornly persisted claims that these carvings were left by Vikings, Phoenicians, or even lost tribes of Israel. These ideas often stem from a dated colonial mindset that couldn't fathom Native Americans creating sophisticated art. One popular myth suggests Norse explorers ventured into the Appalachians, leaving behind the swirling symbols as some kind of cryptic trail marker. But the timeline alone dismantles this idea. The Viking Age spanned roughly the late 8th to 11th centuries, while carbon dating places some Judaculla carvings at over 6,000 years old, long before Norse longships ever touched North American shores. Even if Vikings had reached this far inland, their runic alphabet bears no resemblance to the site's abstract petroglyphs. Another persistent theory points to Phoenician sailors, arguing the carvings resemble Mediterranean script. This notion gained traction in the late 19th century when amateur historians, unfamiliar with indigenous symbology, forced parallels between Judaculla's spirals and Phoenician letters. Modern archaeology flatly rejects this. Phoenician writing is linear and phonetic, designed for record-keeping, while Judaculla's motifs are ritualistic and nonlinear. More damningly, no Phoenician artifacts, pottery, tools, or ship remnants have ever been found in the southeastern United States. The idea that ancient sailors trekked hundreds of miles inland to carve soapstone, then vanished without leaving any other trace, defies logic. Then there's the 10 lost tribes hypothesis, suggesting the carvings were made by Israelites fleeing Assyrian exile. Proponents cherry-pick superficial similarities. Certain Judaculla figures vaguely resemble stick figure depictions in ancient Near Eastern art, while ignoring the vast cultural disconnect. Cherokee traditions explicitly describe the carvings' purpose and origin, passed down through generations, while zero evidence links them to Semitic languages or iconography. Worse, these theories often ignore the living Cherokee people, as if their oral histories were less valid than European speculation. The truth is, these fringe claims share a common flaw. They treat the rocks as a puzzle to solve rather than a sacred text in a living tradition. Indigenous peoples didn't just randomly scratch symbols onto stone. They embedded layers of meaning tied to their cosmology. The seven-toed footprints align with Tzul'kalu's legend. The spirals mirror designs in Cherokee basketry and dance regalia. Even the soapstone's magnetic properties resonate with indigenous concepts of spiritual energy. These aren't vague coincidences, they're threads in a cultural fabric that's endured for millennia. Modern archaeology has moved beyond colonial fantasies, partnering with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians to study the site through indigenous epistemologies. Laser scans reveal tool marks matching pre-Columbian implements, not iron chisels. Soil analysis shows millennia of ritual activity, tobacco residue, pigment fragments consistent with Cherokee ceremonial practices. The rocks themselves tell the story, thousands of carvings layered over centuries, reflecting the same symbols found in ancestral Cherokee villages. No aliens, no Vikings, no mysterious lost races, just the hands of countless generations, speaking across time in a language older than writing. What's most revealing is how these debunked theories persist in pop culture, while indigenous knowledge is still sidelined. Television documentaries magnify sensational claims, and internet forums spin elaborate fantasies, all while Cherokee elders patiently explain the true significance of the carvings. The rocks don't need imported myths to be extraordinary. Their power lies in the uninterrupted connection they represent, a people and their land, a past that's never really passed. The next time someone suggests Judaculla's carvings came from across the ocean, remember this: the deepest mysteries aren't those we project onto the stones, but the ones they've been whispering all along. Among the thousands of carvings at Judaculla, a few striking symbols seem to whisper a tantalizing possibility. Could these grooves hold the roots of the Cherokee written language? In the early 1800s, a Cherokee silversmith named Sequoyah revolutionized his culture by creating the Cherokee syllabary, a written system that allowed his people to record their stories, laws, and traditions for the first time. But some researchers now wonder if Sequoyah's brilliance was partly inspired by much older symbols already etched into the land itself. Could the Judaculla carvings be a precursor, a visual bridge between ancient petroglyphs and modern Cherokee script? Look closely at certain Judaculla symbols and you'll notice patterns that echo Sequoyah's syllabary. A series of connected arcs resembles the Cherokee letter for yo, while a distinctive crosshatch design mirrors the character for na. Even more intriguing are the humanoid figures with outstretched arms, strikingly similar to the syllabary's symbol for human. These parallels aren't exact, but they suggest something profound, that Sequoyah might have drawn on visual traditions far older than his time, reimagining ancient motifs into a functional alphabet. Cherokee elders have long spoken of the rocks as a place of teaching, where knowledge was passed down through images long before words. Yet the timeline complicates this theory. Radiocarbon dating places some Judaculla carvings over 6,000 years old, far predating not just the syllabary but the Cherokee people themselves. This raises a haunting question. If these symbols weren't Proto-Cherokee, whose language were they trying to speak? Some anthropologists propose the carvings belong to an even older cultural layer, created by ancestors of the Cherokee or a lost people who once shared this land. The soapstone might hold fragments of a linguistic puzzle we're only beginning to piece together, a visual dialect spoken across millennia, evolving with each generation that added its mark. What's undeniable is how the Cherokee have interacted with these symbols for centuries. Tribal stories describe shamans using the carvings as mnemonic devices, tracing the grooves to recall sacred stories or clan lineages. This practice blurs the line between art and writing, suggesting that for the Cherokee, communication wasn't just about conveying information, it was about awakening memory. A spiral might not represent a single word but an entire origin story. A zigzag could summon the thunder beings without needing phonetic transcription. In this light, the Judaculla Rocks aren't just a failed alphabet or a precursor to writing, they're a different way of thinking about language itself, one where meaning lies in the curve of a line and the depth of a groove. Modern linguists caution against forcing the carvings into a written language framework. Unlike Sequoyah's precise syllabary, Judaculla's symbols resist standardization. Their meanings shift with context, placement, even the time of day they're viewed. But that fluidity might be the point. The rocks don't just communicate, they transform. A carving that seems abstract at noon might cast shadows at dusk that clearly outline a deer or a dancer. This dynamism suggests the symbols weren't meant to be read in a linear way but experienced, a language not of the page but of the land. Perhaps the true connection between the Judaculla carvings and the Cherokee syllabary isn't about direct lineage but shared philosophy. Both systems emerge from a culture that sees the world as alive with meaning, where every mark, whether on stone or paper, carries the weight of history and the spark of creation. Sequoyah didn't just invent characters, he captured the spirit of his people's relationship with symbols. And in those winding Judaculla grooves, we might hear the echoes of that same spirit whispering across the centuries. For the eastern band of Cherokee Indians today, the Judaculla Rocks aren't just relics of the past, they're living monuments, pulsing with stories that still shape identity and tradition. Tribal elder Marie Junaluska, whose family has lived in the shadow of these carvings for generations, describes them as the handwriting of our ancestors. She recalls childhood warnings from her grandmother: never point at the rocks with a straight finger, always curve your hand to show respect. This small gesture speaks volumes about how the Cherokee relationship with the site endures not as distant history, but as an ongoing conversation. Contemporary Cherokee artists like Potter Amanda Crow draw direct inspiration from the petroglyphs, incorporating spiral motifs and slant-eyed figures into their work. "When I trace those carvings with my fingers," Crow explains, "I'm touching the same lines my great-great-grandmother might have touched." Her ceramics, adorned with Judaculla's seven-toed footprints, sell at galleries across the country, carrying ancient symbols into modern homes. This artistic revival isn't just about aesthetics, it's a deliberate act of cultural reclamation, ensuring these icons remain vibrant rather than frozen behind museum glass. But the rock's significance isn't limited to art. For Cherokee language instructor Tommy Wildcat, their teaching tools. His students learn Talogi, the Cherokee language, by composing stories about the carvings, imagining dialogues between Tzulkalu and contemporary characters. The rocks don't just show us how to remember, Wildcat says, they show us how to imagine. This approach mirrors traditional Cherokee pedagogy, where knowledge wasn't just recited but experienced through layered narrative. Ceremonially, the site still holds power. Though exact rituals remain private, elders acknowledge that offerings, tobacco ties, cornmeal bundles sometimes appear near the boulders left by those seeking Tzulkalu's guidance. What's striking is how these practices adapt. Where ancestors might have petitioned for hunting success, modern prayers might focus on healing addiction or protecting the environment. The rocks become a mirror, reflecting how Cherokee spirituality evolves while staying rooted. Perhaps most unexpectedly, Judaculla has entered pop culture. The Eastern Band's youth group recently produced a graphic novel casting Tzulkalu as a superhero battling colonial exploitation, while Cherokee hip-hop artist Def Eye samples recordings of water flowing near the rocks in his tracks. These reinterpretations aren't dilutions of tradition, they're proof of its resilience. As Elder Junaluska puts it, a story that stops changing, stops breathing. The greatest shift, though, is in stewardship. Where past generations avoided the site out of reverence, today's Cherokee actively engage not as tourists but as guardians. Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Jeremy Brown oversees efforts to 3D map the carvings while training young tribal members in traditional preservation techniques. "We're not just saving stones," he says, "we're saving the right to interpret our own history." This duality, honoring the sacred while embracing innovation, might be Judaculla's most enduring lesson. The rocks don't just connect past and present, they remind us that some conversations never end, they only deepen. The Judaculla Rocks owe their existence not just to human hands, but to the peculiar geology that shaped them. Soapstone, a metamorphic rock so soft you can scratch it with a fingernail, yet durable enough to withstand millennia of mountain weather. This unique material forms when tectonic forces heat and compress talc-rich minerals, creating a stone that's paradoxically both malleable and resilient. Unlike granite or sandstone, which splinter under tools, soapstone yields smoothly to bone chisels or sharpened quartz, allowing carvers to create precise grooves without shattering the surface. But what truly sets this stone apart is its warmth, literally. Soapstone absorbs heat like a sponge, radiating it back slowly. On frosty Appalachian mornings, the rocks would have felt alive under ancient hands, pulsing with stored sunlight long after the surrounding earth grew cold. To the Cherokee, this wasn't just practical, it was sacred. A stone that held heat must also hold memory. The site's natural formations amplify this mystique. The main boulder cluster sits at a precise tilt, its face angled to catch the first and last light of solstice days. Streaks of iron oxide vein the soapstone like rust-colored lightning, mirroring the zigzag petroglyphs carved into its surface. Even the rock's placement seems deliberate, perched where three creeks converge, their soapstone surfaces streaked with mineral deposits from centuries of flowing water. These details wouldn't have escaped indigenous observers. Cherokee cosmology sees patterns as portals, the way iron streaks mimic carvings or how water grooves align with engraved lines would have signaled the rocks were listening. Then there's the magnetism. Compasses behave erratically near Judaculla, their needles twitching as if tugged by invisible hands. Modern geologists attribute this to magnetite deposits within the soapstone, but to the Cherokee, such anomalies were proof of spiritual energy. Imagine a shaman millennia ago laying a lodestone near the carvings and watching it spin, confirming what they already knew. This was where worlds intersected. Even the rock's acoustics play tricks, strike certain boulders, and they emit a low, resonant hum, almost like distant chanting. But perhaps most astonishing is how the soapstone ages. Over centuries, its surface develops a self-sealing patina, a thin, weathered crust that actually protects deeper carvings from erosion. This natural preservation might explain why generations kept returning to the same canvas. Each new etching added to a palimpsest that the land itself seemed determined to safeguard. The Cherokee didn't just choose these rocks to carve. The rocks, in their quiet way, chose them back, not as a blank slate, but as a collaborator in something eternal. Among the most vivid Cherokee traditions tied to the Judaculla Rocks is the story of the Bear Dance, a ritual performed by ancestors to honor Tzulkalu and seek his blessing before important hunts. Elders describe how dancers would form circles around the largest boulder, their footsteps tracing the same spirals carved into the stone, while shamans chanted verses asking the slant-eyed giant to guide their arrows. The rhythm wasn't arbitrary, it mirrored the pulse of the earth, a rhythm some say you can still feel if you press your palm against the soapstone on a quiet morning. These ceremonies weren't mere performances, they were acts of reciprocity, a way to acknowledge the land's generosity before taking from it. The dance steps themselves held hidden meanings. Men imitated the cautious tread of hunters, their bodies low to the ground like stalking panthers, while women moved in sweeping arcs that echoed the crescent moon petroglyphs nearby. Children participated too, stomping their feet in patterns that matched the seven-toed footprints, a way to teach younger generations the giant's legend through movement rather than words. What's remarkable is how these motions aligned with the carving's placement. Certain grooves on the rocks show where patterns suggesting they were used as percussion instruments, struck with antler clubs to keep time. The entire site became a living stage where every symbol served as both script and scenery. Oral histories recount how the dances changed with the seasons. Spring rituals focused on renewal, with dancers wearing masks carved to resemble Tzulkalu's slanted eyes, their bodies painted with red ochre mixed from the same iron-rich soil streaking the boulders. Autumn ceremonies were more solemn, thanking the giant for a successful harvest while asking protection through winter. Elders like Lloyd Arnich, who learned these stories from his grandmother, emphasize how the dances weren't just about the past, they reinforced community bonds. When you step in time with your ancestors, he explains, you remember you're part of something bigger than yourself. Some of the most poignant accounts describe the silent dances held during times of crisis. When drought parched the valleys or disease threatened the villages, participants would move without music or speech, their gestures slow and deliberate, tracing the rock's zigzag lightning symbols as prayers for intervention. The absence of sound amplified the ceremony's power, making the rustle of leaves or the distant cry of a raven seem like voices from the spirit world. These silent rituals underscore how the Cherokee viewed the Judaculla Rocks not just as a place of celebration, but as a conduit for the most urgent conversations between humans and the divine. Today, fragments of these traditions survive in modern Cherokee stomp dances, where elements of the old ceremonies blend with contemporary practices. While the full bear dance hasn't been performed at the site in generations, its legacy lingers in the careful way tribal members still approach the carvings, never stepping on them directly, always moving around them with the same reverence their ancestors reserved for sacred ground. The stones themselves seem to remember. On certain nights when the wind rushes through the valley just right, old-timers swear they can hear the echo of antler clubs tapping stone, a ghostly rhythm rising from the grooves like a heartbeat that refuses to fade. Standing in the quiet hollow where the Judaculla Rocks rest, you might notice something unusual. The way sound behaves here isn't like anywhere else in these mountains. Speak near the largest boulder and your voice doesn't just fade into the trees. It lingers, bouncing off the soapstone in a way that almost feels intentional. This peculiar acoustic phenomenon isn't coincidence. Recent studies suggest the carvings themselves might have been placed to manipulate sound, turning the entire site into a natural amplifier during ancient ceremonies. Known as archaeoacoustics, this emerging field examines how prehistoric cultures used landscapes and artifacts to shape auditory experiences, and Judaculla's rocks seem tailor-made for it. Take the main cluster of boulders. Their curved surfaces form a rough semicircle, creating what acoustic engineers call a sound mirror. When researchers from Western Carolina University tested the site, they found certain spots where a handclap produces a sharp, ricocheting echo, but only at specific frequencies. Even more intriguing, many of the deepest carvings align precisely with these acoustic hotspots, as if marking where a singer or drummer should stand for maximum resonance. Some grooves even appear angled to deflect sound waves toward the central gathering space where listeners would have stood. It's as if the stones were engineered to carry voices across the valley, turning whispers into proclamations. Then there's the water. The convergence of three creeks near the rocks adds a constant rhythmic backdrop, a natural white noise that would have masked peripheral sounds during rituals, focusing attention on the ceremony. Cherokee elders describe how shamans used this water music intentionally, timing chants to the pulse of the streams. On quiet mornings, if you position yourself just right near the largest boulder, the flowing water creates an eerie auditory illusion, almost like distant chanting, as if the stones themselves are humming along. Perhaps most haunting are the singing grooves. Certain spirals and zigzags, when traced with a wooden or bone tool, produce clear, bell-like tones. Experimental archaeologists have recreated these sounds using deer antler tips, and the results are uncanny. A single groove can emit multiple pitches depending on speed and pressure, suggesting the carvers understood harmonic principles long before formal music theory. One particular serpentine carving, when played from end to end, approximates the descending call of a red-tailed hawk, a sacred messenger in Cherokee cosmology. Was this auditory mimicry intentional? The tribal stories hint at yes. They speak of Tzul'kalu's ability to throw his voice through the rocks, making animal sounds echo from nowhere. Modern technology reveals even deeper layers. Laser scans show that some carvings cluster in patterns matching standing wave nodes, points where sound vibrations would have intensified naturally during ceremonies. These aren't random scratches, they're acoustic waypoints guiding where voices and instruments should interact with the stone for dramatic effect. Picture a shaman's chant bouncing between boulders, amplified by the soapstone's unique density, while drumbeats syncopate with the creek's flow. The entire site becomes an instrument tuned across centuries. This sonic dimension adds profound context to Tzul'kalu's legend. If the giant truly controlled storms, as Cherokee stories claim, then the rock's ability to mimic thunder through reverberation takes on new meaning. A clap of hands near the right carving can produce a low, rolling boom eerily similar to distant thunder, an effect early settlers likely interpreted as supernatural. Even the seven-toed footprints might have served an acoustic purpose. Their deep, cupped shapes catch and distort sound waves, creating localized echoes that seem to follow you as you move past them. What emerges is a vision far beyond static carvings. The Judaculla Rocks weren't just seen, they were heard, felt, and interacted with. Every spiral and zigzag wasn't merely symbolic. It was part of a multisensory ritual landscape where sound shaped spirituality. The stones didn't just tell stories, they sang them, whispered them, and sometimes roared them across the valleys, ensuring even those who couldn't read the symbols could feel their power. In a culture where oral tradition was paramount, these rocks didn't just mark sacred ground, they made it resonate. The Judaculla Rocks sit on private land, a fact that has sparked decades of quiet conflict between the families who own the property, the archaeologists eager to study it, and the Cherokee who view it as sacred ground. Unlike protected sites like Mesa Verde or Choco Canyon, these carvings exist in legal limbo, their future hanging in the balance of competing claims. For the landowners, it's a matter of property rights. Many are descendants of settlers who farmed this valley for generations, wary of outsiders dictating what happens on soil they've stewarded for over a century. One family, who asked not to be named, recalls childhood warnings about government men coming to seize the rocks, a fear rooted in painful histories of Cherokee removal and land grabs. They've allowed controlled access for research and tribal visits but resist formal designation, fearing bureaucracy would strip their agency. Archaeologists face their own dilemma. While eager to document and preserve the carvings, they're caught between scientific urgency and ethical responsibility. Early excavations in the 1960s, conducted without Cherokee consultation, left scars both on the landscape and tribal trust. Modern researchers like Dr. Jane Smith from the University of North Carolina now navigate delicate negotiations, balancing laser scans with landowner concerns and tribal protocols. You can't just rush in with tools, she admits. Every scrape of lichen feels like a negotiation between centuries. Some teams have waited years for permission to study a single boulder, their permits tangled in legal debates over who gets to define stewardship. For the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, the rocks represent unfinished justice. Tribal historian Tom Belt recounts how 19th century treaties promised protection for sacred sites, yet Judaculla remained excluded, its significance dismissed by officials who saw only primitive scribbles. Today, the tribe advocates for co-management, a model where landowners retain title but collaborate with Cherokee cultural monitors. This isn't about ownership, Belt clarifies. It's about respect. These carvings were speaking Cherokee long before deeds existed. Some families have welcomed this approach, allowing tribal members to conduct ceremonies and advise on conservation. Others remain hesitant, their fences literal and symbolic. The tension peaks during solstices when crowds of visitors, some reverent, some reckless, converge on the site. Landowners complain of trampled crops and litter. Archaeologists cringe at amateur glyph rubbings that accelerate erosion. Cherokee elders mourn cigarette butts left atop petroglyphs. A 2019 incident went viral when a YouTube influencer live-streamed himself chiseling his initials near a seven-toed footprint, sparking outrage. The resulting lawsuit highlighted the legal gray zone. Vandalism charges were minimal as the rocks lack federal protection, yet glimmers of compromise emerged. A local land trust recently secured easements to buffer the site from development, while Cherokee youth programs teach respectful visitation. One farmer, prompted by his granddaughter's school project on Tzulkolu, now hosts an annual Stewardship Day where archaeologists, tribal members, and neighbors clean the site together. Turns out, he says, we all want the same thing for these rocks to outlast us. The deeper conflict isn't just over land deeds or research permits. It's about whose voice gets to interpret this place. Are the carvings artifacts to analyze, assets to control, or ancestors to honor? The answer, like the grooves themselves, lies in layers, each generation adding its mark without erasing what came before. What's clear is this: the Judaculla Rocks have survived 6,000 years of storms and settlers. The question is whether they'll survive our ideas of what they should be. The mystery of the Judaculla Rocks hasn't just fascinated scholars. It's ignited the imaginations of storytellers, musicians, and filmmakers, weaving its way into modern pop culture like an ancient whisper refusing to be silenced. Take the haunting melody of folk singer Shannon Whitworth's Judaculla, a ballad that spins the slant-eyed giant's legend into a mournful ode about forgotten histories. Her lyrics, carved in stone but washed in rain, the old ones speak but who remains, capture the site's eerie duality, blending Cherokee lore with contemporary longing. The song's music video, filmed in the misty hollows near the actual rocks, lingers on close-ups of the spirals, as if the camera itself is trying to decode their meaning. Documentaries have swarmed the site, each framing its enigma through a different lens. The History Channel's Ancient Aliens famously and controversially suggested the carvings were extraterrestrial in origin, complete with dramatic reenactments of Tzul'Kalu as a star being. Cherokee activists swiftly countered this narrative, with tribal historian Freeman Owl appearing in PBS's Native America to reclaim the story, tracing petroglyphs to ancestral ceremonies. The contrast couldn't be starker. One production reduces the rocks to a sensational puzzle, while the other honors them as a living testament. Meanwhile, indie filmmakers like Adam Jones have taken a quieter approach. His short film Seven Toes uses the Judaculla legend to explore themes of cultural erasure, casting Cherokee actors to reenact the bear dance amid half-eroded carvings. The film's most powerful moment, a modern elder's hands tracing the same grooves his ancestors might have touched, a silent rebuttal to theories that dismiss indigenous voices. Literature, too, has embraced the rock's mystique. Cherokee author Annette Sonnet Clapsaddle wove them into her award-winning novel Even As We Breathe, where a young protagonist discovers that the carvings shift slightly each time he blinks, a metaphor for how history reshapes itself under colonialism's gaze. Even mainstream thrillers like the Judaculla Code, a riff on the Da Vinci Code, posit the petroglyphs as keys to a lost pre-Columbian civilization, though Cherokee critics note the book's tendency to exoticize rather than engage. More nuanced is the graphic novel Tzul'Kalu, Guardian of the Blue Ridge, created by Cherokee High School students in collaboration with elder storytellers. Its pages vibrate with hyper-detailed renditions of the carvings, reimagining the giant as a spectral protector, battling land developers' myth as modern allegory. Then there's the internet's role, Reddit threads dissecting laser scans, TikTok videos of visitors reacting to the rock's magnetism, and even a viral meme superimposing Tzul'Kalu's face onto the distracted boyfriend stock photo. While some tribal members cringe at the reductiveness, others see opportunity. The Eastern Band's Youth Council now runs its own YouTube channel, Judaculla Uncovered, debunking myths with humor and science. One episode features a teen comparing the rock's solstice alignments to Pokemon Sun and Moon's celestial mechanics, a playful bridge between generations. Perhaps the most unexpected homage lies in video games. The open-world RPG Kena, Bridge of Spirits, includes a Judaculla-inspired shrine where spirit masks mirror the slant-eyed petroglyphs. Developers consulted Cherokee cultural advisors to avoid appropriation, weaving the symbolism into a broader theme of ancestral communication. It's a far cry from early arcade games that reduced indigenous imagery to crude stereotypes, proof that pop culture can evolve when creators listen. What unites these interpretations, from song lyrics to pixel art, isn't just fascination with the unknown. It's the rock's uncanny ability to serve as a Rorschach test for our collective anxieties about lost histories, unheeded warnings, and the fragile threads connecting past to present. The Judaculla Rocks don't just appear in stories, they challenge us to ask who gets to tell them. And as long as those carvings endure, so will the conversations they spark, whether in academic journals, on Spotify playlists, or around virtual campfires. One of the most puzzling aspects of the Judaculla Rocks isn't just what the carvings depict, it's how unevenly time has treated them. On a single soapstone boulder, you might find spirals as crisp as the day they were carved, right beside figures so weathered they're barely shadows. This striking disparity hints at a deeper mystery. Were these symbols created in one concentrated burst of activity, or did generations return to this site over millennia, each leaving their mark in stone? The answer could rewrite our understanding of indigenous cultural continuity in the Appalachians. Close examination reveals clues in the weathering patterns. Some grooves show smooth, rounded edges from centuries of wind and water, while others retain sharp, angular cuts almost as if they were shielded from the elements. One theory suggests the deepest carvings, those gouged with intentional force, simply resisted erosion longer. But there's an intriguing alternative. Perhaps the site saw intermittent use, with long periods of dormancy between phases of activity. Carbon dating of organic materials trapped in the grooves supports this, showing spikes in pigment residues separated by centuries. Imagine a cycle where the rocks lay quiet for generations, only to be rediscovered and reinterpreted by new eyes, each wave of carvers adding to the palimpsest without erasing what came before. The content of the carvings adds another layer to the puzzle. Among the clearest symbols are celestial patterns, constellations, solstice markers, while the most faded tend to be human figures or animal forms. This imbalance might reflect shifting priorities across eras. Early creators may have focused on practical astronomy, while later artisans emphasized storytelling or ritual. Archaeologist Dr. Sarah Ridley notes an even more tantalizing possibility. The weathering differences could indicate varying levels of sacredness. Some symbols were meant to endure, others were deliberately left ephemeral, their temporary nature part of their power. Technology is revealing secrets the naked eye can't see. Multispectral imaging has detected ghostly, under carvings, faint lines buried beneath more recent marks, some following entirely different patterns. One boulder, when scanned, showed a massive serpent design underlying the visible seven-toed footprints, suggesting the giant's legend may have absorbed or replaced an older serpent cult. Even more startling are the thermal anomalies detected near certain carvings, microscopic heat fractures indicating where fires or heated tools were applied, possibly as part of forgotten rituals. These hidden traces hint that the rock's full story is far more complex than the surface suggests. Perhaps the greatest unanswered question isn't technical but philosophical. Why did this specific location remain sacred across so many cultural shifts? Unlike burial mounds or village sites, which often reflect single periods, the Judaculla Rocks seem to have drawn reverence continuously. Some researchers point to the convergence of three creeks as a perpetual draw, water sources being timeless magnets for human activity. Others argue the soapstone's unique tactile qualities, its warmth and workability, made it feel alive in a way other stones didn't. But Cherokee elder Marsha Panther offers a simpler explanation. Some places just remember stronger. The rocks don't hold secrets, they are the secret. What's certain is that the Judaculla Rocks still guard mysteries. Laser scans hint at previously unnoticed carvings on the boulders' undersides, inaccessible without excavation. But tribal elders oppose disturbing the stones, believing their power depends on staying rooted. Meanwhile, seasonal shifts continue to expose new details. A heavy rain in 2019 revealed a previously hidden set of handprints, their fingers bearing the distinctive 7-digit pattern of Tzulkalu. Each discovery feels like a whisper from the past, hinting that the rock's full story isn't just buried by time. It's waiting, patient as stone itself, for the right moment to speak. If you're planning a visit to the Judaculla Rocks today, timing is everything. Early morning or late afternoon light casts long shadows across the soapstone, making the carvings appear sharper and more defined. Midday sun can wash out the finer details, so aim for those golden hours when the slanting sunlight breathes life into the grooves. Weather plays a role too. Light rain can darken the stone, revealing patterns that might otherwise go unnoticed, while heavy downpours make the trails slippery. Check the forecast, but don't let a drizzle deter you. Some of the most hauntingly beautiful views happen when mist clings to the valley, wrapping the rocks in an almost mythic haze. Respect is paramount here. This isn't just an open-air museum. It's a sacred space with living significance for the Cherokee. Before approaching the carvings, pause at the edge of the clearing. Traditional protocols suggest offering a silent acknowledgement, a mental, "I am here to listen," rather than just to look. Never climb on the boulders or trace the carvings with your fingers. The oils from skin can accelerate erosion. Instead, bring a sketchpad or camera to capture the symbols from a respectful distance. If you feel compelled to leave something, tobacco ties or cornmeal bundles are appropriate offerings, placed gently at the base of the stones, not on them. The site's remote location demands preparation. Sturdy shoes are a must. The trails are uneven, and the creek crossings can be slick. Pack water and snacks, but carry out all trash. There are no bins here, and littering disrespects both the land and its stewards. Cell service is spotty, so download maps or coordinates beforehand. The rocks sit on private property, and access is a privilege granted by landowners who have balanced preservation with public interest. Follow posted guidelines, stay on marked paths, and keep voices low. This isn't the place for loud chatter or music. For photographers, a polarizing filter helps reduce glare on the soapstone, bringing out the carving's depth. Wide-angle lenses can capture the scale of the boulders, while macro shots reveal the intricate tool marks within individual grooves. Drones are prohibited. The noise disrupts the valley's serenity, and the eastern band of Cherokee Indians considers their presence invasive. If you're sketching, pay attention to how the light shifts. What's invisible at noon might leap out at sunset, like the seven-toed footprints that seem to glow in certain angles of twilight. Consider visiting during the solstices or equinoxes, when the rock's celestial alignments come alive. Cherokee descendants sometimes gather quietly during these times, and while ceremonies are private, the energy is palpable. Even if you don't witness rituals, standing where the solstice light strikes a spiral or zigzag connects you to the generations who calibrated their lives by these stones. Winter visits have their own magic. Bare trees reveal new sightlines, and frost etches the carvings in white, making them stand out like scars on the dark stone. Before you leave, take a moment at the confluence of the three creeks. Listen to the water's rhythm, the same sound that shaped ceremonies for millennia. The Judaculla Rocks don't just ask for your eyes, they ask for your presence. Walk away slowly, carrying the weight of what you've witnessed, not as a souvenir, but as a reminder that some places refuse to be mere destinations. They remain above all conversations. The Judaculla Rocks linger in the Appalachian mist, not as a solved puzzle, but as a living question carved into the landscape. Thousands of years after the first grooves were etched into that warm soapstone, we're left straddling two worlds, one where science maps solstice alignments and carbon dates pigments, and another where Cherokee seven-toed footprints still echo with the weight of Cherokee legend. This isn't just an archaeological site, it's a conversation across time where every spiral and zigzag refuses to be pinned to a single meaning. What makes these petroglyphs endure isn't just their mystery, it's their ability to hold contradictions without crumbling. Their celestial calendars and sacred thresholds, historical records and living prayers, all bound together by stone that remembers the touch of hands we'll never know. Think about the layers here quite literally. On one boulder, a 6,000-year-old hunting scene might lie beneath a 2,000-year-old ceremonial symbol, which itself shares space with colonial-era initials scratched in defiance of Cherokee warnings. The rocks don't separate these stories, they let them collide, asking us to consider how history isn't a straight line but a palimpsest, where every generation writes over the past without fully erasing it. Even the science underscores this. Those laser scans revealing hidden serpent carvings beneath Cherokee footprints aren't just uncovering facts, they're showing us how myths evolve, how cultures absorb and reinvent their own origins. At the heart of this enigma is something far more profound than who made these. It's the realization that some places refuse to be merely studied, they demand to be felt. The Cherokee understood this instinctively, framing the rocks not as artifacts but as participants in an ongoing relationship between people and the land. When elders speak of Tzul'kalu's presence lingering in the soapstone's warmth or the way carvings seem to shift when no one's looking, they're not invoking superstition. They're articulating a truth modern archaeology is only beginning to grasp, that sacred spaces carry memory in ways we can't yet quantify. The Judaculla Rocks don't just challenge us to decode symbols, they ask us to humble ourselves before the limits of our understanding. So where does that leave us? With more than answers, with wonder, with the itch to look closer at the next weathered boulder we pass, to wonder about the hands that might have shaped it. The real gift of Judaculla isn't a solved mystery. It's the reminder that our world is still thick with stories waiting to be noticed. Maybe they're hidden in plain sight, like those solstice shadows tracing ancient spirals. Maybe they're half buried in creeks or whispered in languages we've forgotten how to hear. But they're there, and if a slab of soapstone in the Carolina Hills can hold 6 millennia of questions, imagine what else is out there quietly keeping its secrets. The rocks have spoken for thousands of years. The real question is, are we listening?